Welcome to Clickers and Flickers. I'm Dawn Stevens, and the purpose of our show is to introduce you to photographers and their work. Today, we will be speaking with William Carter. And for 35 years, William Carter's career as a successful writer, photojournalist, photographer has taken him all over the world. Starting in 1965, his work was published in Life magazine and many places afterwards. He's had 4 books at least published on his work. He's got the Ghost Towns of the West. He has Middle West Country. He did a book on Preservation Hall, which is New Orleans jazz. And his most recent book is Illuminations on Fine Art Nude Photography. And all through this, William Carter has been a dedicated jazz clarinetist. My favorite combination, photography and a musician. It gives me great pleasure to introduce William Carter. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Don.
You know, you are so successful at what you do, and what I like to hear is that you are a self-taught photographer. Can you tell me how you got started?
I got started by taking some pictures of some children on a school playground with a camera that my mother had brought me back from Japan in 1958. And suddenly people wanted to buy prints. Then I had to learn how to make prints. Then I had to learn this and that and the other thing. People didn't have photography courses in the 50s. So I'd hang around with guys that knew a little bit more than I, and then I started doing prints, and then one thing led to another. Then I got a job in New York with Harper and Row, the book publishers, as editing picture books, and one thing just led to the next. And pretty soon I went with a picture agency, and they didn't have anybody in Beirut, Lebanon, so I was suddenly, you learn as you go along. I didn't have any formal training.
Who are some of the photographers that have influenced you, or whose work you really admire?
Well, I would divide that in 2 parts. Cartier-Bresson is a documentary journalistic photographer and his work I admired very much, and I worked in that vein overseas doing assignments for many years and in the United States. I also admire California classical photographers, Edward Weston, Imogene Cunningham, and so forth. These I put on hold for 20 years while I was doing this other kind of work. Then I came back to California. I did a book on ghost towns for Sunset, and then I got back into the pure California style photography, which my nudes I put in that category. And that was a 15-year project, the nudes, whereas the other one was 20 years of doing every which way, every kind of thing all over the world for various clients.
Right. I wanted to ask you about Life magazine. I mean, that's just such an important part in photography. When you worked when your work was in Life magazine and you were a freelance photographer, did you choose your subjects or did they give you assignments?
It's some of both. When I was based in the Middle East, I was kind of wet behind the ears when I got there, and I went out to various wild places with a New York Times correspondent and did some things. He had been to Kurdistan in northern Iraq. We heard a lot about that in the Gulf War, but in 1965 no one had heard about the Kurds. He'd been the first one to go up there, and I went with him, and then I proposed that to Life magazine, and we got an assignment from that, and I spent 6 weeks traveling with the rebels in northern Iraq, illegally crossing the border, dressed as a Kurd. It was a very big adventure, and it was a nice professional breakthrough to be published in Life magazine.
Oh yeah, what year was that?
65.
65. Okay, and we're going to be looking at some of your work in a minute. Our director is going to bring it up, and it's going to be some of your early work, so you're going to be able to tell us about it. And here it is. Can you tell us what we're looking at?
That's a picture in Cairo. I mentioned having gone there with a New York Times correspondent. Wherever I went, I was usually working on a particular project, but I'd always keep a camera on the side for myself, and that was just a street scene that intrigued me. And as I say, that was influenced by my documentary photographer idols. I spent 2 years in the Middle East, so I often find, for example, in that one, that was when I first got there. You see very freshly at first when you get to a place. The newness of the thing really strikes you in that one. Now this is a ghost town shot. This was from my book, Ghost Towns of the West, which Sunset published in 1970, and again in 76. Was in print for 25 years, just went out of print. And that was Roaming Around the West. That picture is in New Mexico. It's one of those old mining towns that fell into, when the gold and silver ran out, people left it, and these places are left in the desert. And it turned out to be a very, very popular book. And it was sure fun for me. This is another from the Ghost Town series. This is in California, up in a kind of a restored mining town called Murphy's on Highway 49, where they first found the gold. I roamed around in a camper for a year and a half, sleeping in odd places, including a jail at night, to get some of these shots at the right light. Lighting is so important. This is in Scotland. It's an abstract picture of some rocks, and it's that kind of abstract landscape photography that is something that I'm coming back to only now, many years later. And as I'm dealing with fine art photography now, and dealers like this kind of thing, people will buy that, sold a print of that recently, to hang on their wall in an office. People see a lot of different things in that picture. Faces, I see a lion, and that's actually in Scotland. Again, I lived in England for 2 years, so I traveled around the British Isles quite a lot.
You've lived all over the world. This is just one place you stopped.
Yeah.
Well, this was your earlier work, but what we're going to see today is work from your latest book, Illuminations, and it's on fine art nude photography. And I want to ask you, in your opinion, what's the difference between being, quote, naked and being nude?
Well, I suppose there'll be dictionary definitions, but for me, the nude is a universal subject, and one reason the backgrounds of the pictures, they don't show any context. It's not, and there's no references to time and place. So it's universal in time and in place. And so it's open, and it's the full range of experience. And I distinguish it from pornographic nudes, which leave out relationships, leave out a lot of the parts of the person. They simply focus on the physical and not on the spiritual and the emotional being. And I put a lot of love and caring into my pictures, so for me that's, I guess you would call that nude photography.
Right. Well, that makes sense. And you know, in your book you've written that, you quoted, that Alfred Stieglitz's advice to Edward Weston was treat anything you undertake with dignity. And Edward Weston's nudes influenced the photographer Ruth Bernhardt, and she said she didn't even consider herself an artist until she met Edward Weston. Have you met anybody whose such advice or has influenced you like that?
James Joyce, I actually didn't meet him, but his idea of art influenced me a lot. Actually, that came from the Middle Ages. Wholeness, harmony, and radiance. Those are the three qualities. And that's been with me since I was a college student. And that just stands out in everything I try to do is wholeness, harmony, and radiance.
And what would your suggestions be to a photographer who's just beginning to do nude photography?
Find your own eye, your own self. First you have to learn your craft. But don't be too influenced by trends. They come and go. But do it your way. And use your whole self. It's self-exploration. Why do they want to do this? Is it commercial nudes? You want to publish in Playboy? That's one thing. But is that really you? There's a lot of introspection goes on to find it took me a long time to find my own way of stating myself in visual terms.
Okay, you know, our director is going to bring up the next roll-in, and we're going to start seeing some of your nudes, and these are the sets that are right here. Can you tell us about this work?
Well, nude photography is a lot about lighting. Lighting is a primary thing, and this is a single light from the top. And it's about simplicity. Anybody can have somebody take their clothes off, take a picture of them, and it's totally boring. This, you have a shape and you have form and you have a statement going on. And you pay attention to the blacks and the white values. Values are important. Now this series has all black backgrounds. And in a lighting sense, this is very flat front lighting. So you just have this very pure white shape against the black background. The one the other I just mentioned was lighting was from the top. So I think it's very important to simplify your vision in doing the nude. And this is what I'm trying to make a statement of line and edge. The edge here is this one is called Japanese because it reminds me of Japanese art. You see how those black shapes, that's called negative space. That's very important, and how the whole image relates to those four edges. What you're doing as a photographer is you're placing a frame. You've got all sorts of possibilities, but you decide where that frame is going to go, and that creates the form, essentially.
This one's all your work's beautiful, but I love this
and
one too.
They all have names. This one, I didn't know what to name it. I showed it to the model a few days later, and she said, "Oh my goodness, I look like an egg." And I said, "That's it. That's the name. We'll call that egg." And I think the relationship with the model is what. And when I teach, I've taught some photography workshops, and I talk about having a great relationship with the model. Again, this one is one that takes a lot of work in the dark room. It's not only the lighting, but it's the personal touch of the photographer. I would tell anybody that's going to do nudes, at least start with black and white and work in that dark room. It takes me, I might make 10 prints of this, and I might get 2 of them finally when it's all done to come out right, because when they're that white and the print dries down, you can't exactly know what that final tone is.
And this one you titled Earn, right?
Earn.
Yeah. What are we looking at now?
That one is called Pearl, and it reminded me somehow of something that you would find coming out of an oyster shell or the sea or something precious. I think that my work, I hope, at least my feeling is that I have some treasuring of it. I feel precious about it. It's something to be cherished and treasured, and it's not a rip-off of somebody. That one reminds me of Greek statuary.
Definitely.
And it's called Athena as a result. And that delicate shadow coming down is really a big part of it. And just in technical terms, it's the lighting is coming from the top, but then you're adding some front light, and it makes some very delicate values in there. It's another one that's a tough print to make. So I tell the students it's about 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration.
Right.